Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf Tes in Horios. As we learn from Chanukah Beis Yisrael and Sunnah Masar Shiur, we're at the 9th line down on daf Tes Samad Aleph. Now we said that according to this opinion that we just quoted, the opinion of Yosei Glili, who goes like Rav Yirmiyah, who said that a Nasi and a Mashiach, neither one of them, they're not supposed to be poor, therefore they can't fit into the category of a carbonol v'yored, that if you bring an animal, regular four-legged animal, when you are wealthy, when you are poor, you bring birds, and when you are very poor, you bring a flower offering. They can't fit into that category, and therefore they don't bring. That's what Rav Yosei Glili said in the Mishnah, that not only does Bezdin, Parliament Shel Tzibur, does not apply to the karbanos of olav yared, which is Shmiyas Kol, Bitas V'Soyim, and Tumas Mitzvah Kachav, and the Nasi is also like them, including the Mashiach. They're not supposed to be poor. What happens if the Nasi became a leper? It's like Nasi Shenet Stara, and he can't, let's say, do all his duties. Mao. Once he's a Nasi, he's totally excluded from Parmal Davashal, from Carbonol V'Yorei. Oh, Mifter Potter, or is he only Potter while he's the king? When he's not the king, when he can't serve his duties, maybe he should bring a Carbonol V'Yorei. Omerlei Dilacho de Gaza. Whose money does he have? Yours or the treasury? In other words, just because he became a leper doesn't mean he loses his money. He still got the money in the bank, right? And therefore, since he's wealthy, the concept of being wealthy or poor, in other words, the concept of Carbonol V'Yorei means depends if a person's wealthy, poor, or destitute poor. But a person who's a king or a Mashiach or the Kohen Gadol cannot be poor, and therefore Rav Yosei Glili excludes him. But that's only Rav Yosei Glili's opinion. This whole Mishnah we said was brought down. We already talked about Carbonol V'Yorei in the prior Mishnahs. This was brought down to tell us Machlokes between Rav Yosei Glili, Rav Akiva, and we'll see other shitas in the next Mishnah. Rav Yosei Glili says that a Nasi and the Mashiach, the Kohen Gadol, never bring a Carbonol V'Yorei. Rav Akiva says the king does bring them, but he can't bring the Carbonol V'Yorei for Shmiyas Kol, for denying testimony, because he's not supposed to testify at all. But we'll see there's other opinions. We don't pass like either one of them. Tanya, send the Gemara about 10, 11 times down that page, or 12 lines. Tanya Rabbi Akiva over. Mashiach Pater Mikulam. Rabbi Akiva says that the Kohen Gadol is Pater from all. What did Rabbi Akiva say in the Mishnah? That the Nasi, the king, he's chayiv in all three, except for Shmiyas Kol, meaning he's chayiv on Tumas Mikshva Kachav, and he's chayiv on Bitus Vasoyim. These are the three categories of sins for lying under oath, for denying testimony, and for coming to Beis Mikdash in a state of Tumah, that if you do them in a state of Shogeg, made a mistake, you are chayiv to bring a Carbonol V'Yorei. So Rabbi Yosei Glili said, no, it doesn't apply to a Kohen Gadol or to the king, because they're supposed to be rich all the time. Rabbi Akiva says it does apply to the king, however, not Shmiyas Kol, because he doesn't testify. Now we have Tanya Rabbi Akiva Omer, Mashiach Pater Mekulam. Rabbi Akiva, not only did he say, he talks about the king being chayav all of them except for Shmiyas Kol, except for testifying. But Rabbi Akiva says that the Kohen Gadol is Pater from all of them. Why is that? Amar Maitam Rabbi Akiva. Amar Kral, listen to this. The pasuk says like this: Zekar ben An Ravanav, when a Kohen is initiated into the Kahuna, he brings a carbon that day. Any Kohen, like his dedication, his Chanukah Sabayas, he brings a carbon that day. The Kohen Gadol brings this carbon every day of his tenure. Every year he brings what's called Chavit. He brings half in the morning, half at night. We talk about that in Karbanos every day. So it says Zek carbon Aaron Avonab. This is the carbon. What's the Minchas Chavit? It's a mincha, it's a flower offering. This is the one that the Kohen brings. No other flower offering, meaning he's excluded from Carbonol V'Yorei. Carbonol V'Yorei says he rich four-legged, poor two-legged birds, very poor a flower. Kohen Gadol can't do that, because he's supposed to carbon Zuba Chova. Only this is the flower offering that he has to bring, his daily Minchas Chavitin, but he's not chuyiv to bring any other. Therefore, the Kohen Gadol does not bring a Carbonol V'Yorei at all. Says maybe he's only excluded if he's very poor. Now, this doesn't go along with what Yirmiyah said, that the Kohen Gadol can never be poor. Let's say before they gave him the money, there was still a committee raising the money for him. You know how it is. They don't get the
It's in the mail.
It's in the mail, right? He didn't get the money yet. Let's say he's not going like Rav Yirmi, who says the coin, you're supposed to make him bigger, but he didn't have the money, okay? So it makes like this. Maybe if the coin's very poor, he can't bring that carbon because the Torah says what carbon does he bring as a chov? He brings the minchas chavitin every day. That flour offering brings no others. Umayni Asir Seifa. That's what he has to bring, right? Kimad Rahman Dalalos, which is the Asir Seifa. The Asir Seifa is the same, the tenth of an eifa is the same, basically the same amount of flour that he brings with his daily minchas chavitin, the same thing that we bring for the sin, our sin that required carbon alveolet if he's very poor. Avlanias Vashios, if he's just regularly poor, like he brings bird, or he's wealthy, Lo Me'etem, he's not excluded from that. It says Lo Salach, he can't say that. The Chsev says V'chiper Olav HaKohen Al Chatoso Asher Chota. Me'achas me'ela. When he brings this carbon, the Kohen will atone for him. The Kohen brings the carbon on his behalf. From one of these, indicating if you can get a kapar from one of them, you can be kapar for all of them, meaning all three, whether it's four-legged, two-legged, or flour. As opposed to this one, if he can't do the flour, he can't do any of them. If he can't bring any one of them, like in this case the flour, okay, that's how he darshans. So Bekiva says, Kohen Gadol never brings a carbon of the orate. Elameata, what about the says in the same parsha, it says V'hoya ki yesham le'achas me'ela. Are you going to say it means there too? This is at the beginning of the parsha. At the beginning of the parsha, it starts talking about all in the same parsha of Korban Oviyored. It says, if he sins in one of these manners, this is where Vakeshim Lachas to one of them. Even at the beginning, we're not talking about the flour offering. Why we learn Bekiva Omer Nasi Chayev Chutz Mishmias Kol. Right? We started in the Mishnah. Rabbi Kiva says that the Nasi is chayiv in all of them except for Shmias Kol. Okay, so if one of the three sins, whether it's Shmias Kol, Bitus Vasayim, or Tumas Mikshah Kochav, it says if you sin in one of these sins, then you're chayiv. So what about according to Bekiva? The king is chayiv in the other ones, but he's not chayiv on Shmias Kol. So what are you going to say also? If he's not chayiv in one of them, he shouldn't be chayiv in all of them? When it says from one of these things, that means to say from Chayev at the end of the parsha. He talks about the flour offering. So it says if you can't bring one of these, you can't bring any of them, right? Therefore, you're potter from all three. If you can't bring the flour offering, you can't bring the other ones either. At the beginning of the parsha, La'achas Me'el, we're speaking about the three different sins that you're Chayev Korban Oviyored for, right? La'achas lo mashmalei, right? La'achas is not mashmatim one of them. Means any of them. In other words, it's not mashma that if you can't be chayav for Shmias Kol, you can't be chayav for it. And he doesn't have that pressure. Maishna me'achas to mashmalei. Why me'achas is mashma? Says if you can't bring the flour offering, you can't bring the other ones either. You're potter entirely. But when it comes to the three sins, it says if you're not chayav in one of them, you are chayav in the other ones. Why? The maishna me'achas to mashmalei. Why? The kosver achmana lebesof, because there, when it says me'achas, it's at the end when it's talking about the flour offering. Gabi asir seifa lememra. The chol mechayiv says if you mechayiv if you mechayiv in the flour offering, mechayiv because you mechayiv also in the birds and the four-legged animal, which is a kizbor asira. These are meschayv achas man. If you tell me that if you're chayiv in one of them, that's good enough. You're chayiv afbish and meschayv b'kulan. Nichtav ilahai me'achas me'ela b'dalas. Why didn't it say it above when we talk about regular being poor for birds or being wealthy for an animal? Why did it say dafka over here by the asir seifa to tell me that if you can't bring one of them, asir seifa, and a Kohen Gadol can't bring that because the Torah says he has to bring his minchas chavitin. That's what he brings. He doesn't bring anything else. That's tell you that he's not chayiv in any of them. So what do we have here? We have so far we have Rabbi Yosef clearly saying that the Kohen Gadol and the Nasi don't bring any carbon oviore because they're supposed to be wealthy, so it shouldn't apply to them, right? It's only if it's only Sagir Yada, Lo Sasigon, only somebody who might be poor, so this applies to them. They can't be poor. That's Rabbi Yosef Levi. Rabbi Kiva says, according to the we saw in the Mishnah and what we see in the Gemara now, the Kohen Gadol doesn't bring it at all. Why? Because the Kohen Gadol only can bring a flour offering that he's mechuyev to bring every day the minchas chavitin, and he's excluded from any other minchas chavitin. And we see here, if you're not chayiv in the flour offering of the very poor person, you're not chayiv in the other karbanos, even the other sacrifice, either be a bird or an animal. That's what Akiva says. So Akiva says when it comes to the Kohen Mashiach, the Kohen Gadol, he's not chayiv in any of them. That's real. That fits in with Rabbi Yossi Aglili said, but for different reasons. Yossi Aglili says it's because he can't be poor. Rabbi Akiva says it's because he doesn't fit into the pasuk, because he's not supposed to bring a flour offering regularly, and if he can't bring a flour, he can't bring the other ones. However, Rabbi Akiva does say that a king is chayiv in all of them except for Shmiras Kol. So according to Rabbi Akiva, you would be chayiv. A king would be chayiv in korban leviyoret on what? On tumas mikdash v'kadshav and on swearing falsely on a shvuas biti. On those two, which the punishment for them is also korban leviyoret. Okay, says the Mishnah. Now, the first part of this Mishnah is a repetition. In fact, it would have been better had we had this Mishnah at the beginning of the Masechet, because it gives us a good category. You have that many often. But the end of the Mishnah is going to be complicated. It says the Mishnah, all mitzvahs in the Torah, where if you did Mezid, it's Kores, and B'shogeg gets Chatas, which we said that's pretty much like 31 Losas says 31 mitzvahs. Say Losas say Yechayev Kores, the Mezid, Mishog Yechayev Chatas. Hayochad Mivi Kisbira. An individual, a commoner, brings a kisbor or a sira. Hanasi brings a sa'ir, a male goat. Umashiach and the Kohen Gadol ubezin mevi and par almudavar shel sibor par Kohen Mashiach. Of course, goes along if they paskin wrong. Umavados kechavim, if the sin was avodah zara. Hayochad Banasi Mashiach, they all bring a seira. Right, Mashiach also, but of course the Mashiach, if he passes wrong about it. Ubezdin par Bezdin brings a par visar, as we saw yesterday. Right, these are the rules. Par lolas are lechatas. Oshim toli, who brings that? Hayochid ba'nasi chayavin. By Oshim toli, it says nefesh, he sins, and only who brings that? A yochid, an individual commoner, or the king. What is an Oshim toli you bring if you're not sure if you committed a sin for which the punishment would be a chatas kavua? If you know that you sinned, be a chatas kavur like an animal, not korban leviyoret. So Asham Toli Ayachim Nasi Chayavin Umashiach Ubezin Pturin. Why is that? Because as we said, that Mashiach and Bezin are only chayiv if they paskin wrong about it, right? And Rashi says over here on the left side, number one, it's not nefesh achas, right? And he says by Bezin is potter because they're not in the cloud nefesh achas, but it's also, we said this for because when you chayiv Hashem Toli, only if it's something for which you would be a regular sin, not a sin for which you have to paskin wrong first, like the Kohen Gadol and the Bezin. So the Hashem Toli, right, is not brought by the Kohen Gadol or the Bezin, right? Rashi says further above Hashem Toli. Rashi says different. Rashi says Hashem Toli above Rabbeinu Chananel and Rashi on the left side. When you bring an Asham Toli, only if you just did a regular sin, meaning your lack of knowledge, your inadvertence is the same as your sin. There was no difference between your thinking about it and the sin itself. But if you have to think about it first in order for you to be chayav, which is the case by Kohen Gadol or by the Bezin, then it doesn't apply. Okay. Asham Vadai, going on in the Mishnah. Hayochav Anasi Mashiach Hayav, a regular Asham. When you chayiv an Asham, that's not a case of Kores. Asham is the 5 cases of Asham. Asham Shifcha Charufa, Asham Gzelas, right? Asham Nazir. Those things you're not chayiv. You're chayiv. It doesn't make it Mezid or Shogate. You bring an Asham in those cases. And those cases it says there also Asham. It says Nefesh. So Asham Vadai, a regular Asham. Hayochav Anasi Mashiach Chayavin. Right, they're all individuals. Ubezin Pturim. Bezin's Paturim. When do you say Bezin's Chayiv a problem of Shul Sibor? Only when it's something says Dono Kores Vishigas Chatas. Not when the Chiv is an Asham. Shmiras Kol Vita Sanotimus Mikdash. Now we're back to our 3 cases of Korban Leviyoret. If number 1 you deny testimony, it's called Shmiras Kol. Vita Sosoim, you swore falsely. Baltumus Mikdash, if you went to the base Mikdash state of Tumah. Okay, if you did it b'shogate, Bezdin is potter. Why? Because Bezdin's only chayiv where? Davish is done on cars for shigas. So chatas kavua. It's got to be chatas kavua, not a chatas olav yored. By yochad by nasi mashiach chayavin. Oh, now this opinion that a Yochid, a Nasi, and a Mashiach are Chayav. Wait a minute. This sounds like a different shita. That's not Rabbi Yossi. That's not Rabbi Yossi Aglili in the previous Mishnah that Shet Mashiach and the Nasi are potter from all the carbon alveoli because they're never poor. And it also excludes from Rabbi Kiva, who said that the Nasi is also potter from Shmias Kol because he can't testify. And here he says, "Vayochav v'Nasi Mashiach Chayavin Elish Ein Kohen Gadol Mashiach Chayav Altum Smisha Katshav Div Reb Shimon." We're going to see Reb Shimon is going to be explained in the Gemara. So Reb Shimon now, which is a third shita, at least a third shita, right? Reb Shimon says, not like Rabbi Yossi, not Rabbi Kiva. He says that a korban yored, an individual, a commoner, of course, is chayav in that. The Nasi is also chayav in that, and the Kol is chayav, except the Kohen Gadol doesn't bring Tumas Mitzvah Katshav. We'll see why in the Gemara. The Gemara says some reason for Reb Shimon. Umayim Mavin, when they do bring korban yored, they bring when they're chayav for these three sins. Shmias Kol, Bitzas Svayim, Tumas Mitzvah should bring korban yored. Rabbi Lezer Omer, Nasi maybe Sa'ir. Listen to this. Even though it's a korban yored, but Rabbi Lezer says that if he's a king, he brings a Sa'ir. Wow, he brings a Sawyer. Why is that? We'll see that in the Gemara. Because since, where does he say that? The Gemara is going to qualify that and say, he only says that in the case of Tumas Mitzvah Katshav. You see, when you lied falsely or you deny testimony, those are sins that normally Chayav Korban Yored for, but those aren't things that are involved in Kares. You know, you lied, you didn't tell the truth. But Tumas Mitzvah Katshav, if you do it on purpose, you're Chayav Kares. So, Rabbi Lezer says that for Nasi, who brings a sar, if what? And since there's a chiv kares, if he did it b'mesed, if he did it b'shogeg, he doesn't just bring a korban yored, which you could say is potter because he's rich and all that, all the other reasons you have, brings a sawyer, which is the regular punishment that he brings for any sin that he does in the Torah. Now, take a look in the last Mishnah, last Rashi in the Mishnah, or the last few Rashis on the Mishnah. About first of all, even where it says Masisin in the Gemara, look in Rashi. Rashi like this: first Gemara, who had in the Kamar of Shimon, Elish Ein Nasi Chayav Shmias Kol. Reb Shimon excluded in the Mishnah. Reb Shimon says what? That a Kohen Gadol does not bring Tumas Mitzvah Katshav, and he also agrees with Rabbi Kiva in the first Mishnah that the king does not bring for Shmias Kol because he's not allowed to testify. But near the end of the Mishnah in Rashi, and we're on the left side near the bottom of Rashi in the left. Rashi gives a synopsis and said there's three different sheets. Rabbi Yossi Savar Nasi Mashiach P'tur Mikula because they're not supposed to be poor. For Rabbi Kiva Savar Nasi Chayav B'Kulan, Chayav in all of them except for Shmias Kol because he can't testify. Umashiach Pater Mikulan, he agrees with Rabbi Yossi over there. Mashiach is Pater because it's only something which is he's only Chayav on something which if it was if he only chayav on, he's only like the param davashal tzibur, the only chayav on something which the punishment is a regular animal kavua, not olavi yored. Reb Shimon Savar Nasi Mashiach chayavim bekulan ba'olavi yored Nasi Mashiach Elish Ein Kohen Gadol says Mashiach really means the same thing. Kohen Gadol Mashiach chayim al tumas mishkachim. We'll see. That's three shitas. Kati brings down that the Rambam holds there's a fourth shita, the Chachamim, who say Yachid and Nasi Mashiach are chayiv in all of them, and there's a fourth shita there too. Tanya says the Gemara right after the Mishnah. Tanya Shimon Hayano saying Klau. He gave a general rule. Kol shayachid ba'asham talui, wherever an individual has to bring an asham tali, hanasi kiyotzba. Nasi also brings an asham tali. Nasi also brings an asham tali kiyotzba. Mashiach bezdin peturin. Why? Because Mashiach and Bezdin, as we said, by asham talui, it says what? It says it's got to be something like a carbon that an individual is chayiv on without paskening wrong first. So again, Reb Shimon said when it comes to kosher yachid asham tali, whenever a yachid brings an asham tali, Nasi also can bring an asham tali. But I'm a kohen gadol and Bezdin or potter. Kosher b'asham vaday, whoever's chayiv an asham vaday. Nasi and Mashiach, where it says over there nefesh, Nasi Mashiach involved, kiyosaben. Ubesim P'tur, because Bes is only chayiv if they paskin wrong about something where the punishment is kares and chatos, respectively. Shmias Kol B'Tzas Swami Tumas Mikashkachav, the three cases where you have korban yored, Bezin is potter, as we've said before. Nasi u'Mashiach chayavin. Now he says, right, Reb Shimon, this is all Reb Shimon. Nasi and the Mashiach are chayiv. not like we saw in the Mishnah in the name of Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi Galili. Rabbi Shimon says, Nasi Mashiach Chayavin, Elish Ein Nasi Chay B'Shmiyas Kol. There he agrees with Rabbi Akiva, as Rashi said, agrees with Rabbi Akiva. Nasi Chay B'Shmiyas Kol because he can't testify. V'lo Mashiach B'Tumas Mikshakachav. And the Kohen Gadol is Potter Tumas Mikshakachav. Now, sounds like he's saying the Kohen Gadol is Potter and all Tumas Mikshakachav, right? So we'll see. Kol Shabbat Levi Yorei, if you're Chayv Kol Yorei, which is those same three cases, Nasi ki Yotzibo, a Nasi can bring Korban Ol Yored. Mashiach Ubezem Pturin. There he says Mashiach Ubezem is Potter Legamrei. Now what's going on? So the Gemara says it's a steer minei ubei haguf akasha. Amr Chena Mashiach Chaya Betumas Mikshakachav. He said Mashiach Chaya and Al Shena Nasi Chaya B'Shviyas Kol Levi Mikshakachav. Right? We said V'lo Mashiach Betumas Mikshakachav. We said that. When it comes to the three cases of Shmiyas Kol, Beats from Tumas Mishkachav, in the second of the Y lines of the Gemara, we said, Bezin is Potter, Nasi Mashiach Chayavin, Elish Ein Nasi Chayv Shmiyas Kol, V'lo Mashiach B'Tumas Mishkachav. And the Kohen Gadol is Potter from Tumas Mishkachav. It's mashma the other ones. He's Chayiv. He's Chayiv on Korban Ol Yored, on Shmiyas Kol, and Beats Fasaf on the Shvuah. So, again, Haguf Akash in the Gemara, at the end of the third of the wide lines of the Gemara. Now in the fourth of the wide lines. Amr Shein Mashiach Chayv B'Tumas Mishkachav. He's not Chayiv over there. We'll see why. We didn't explain why he holds the Mashiach is Potter there, but we'll see why. B'Tumas Mishkachav, who the Potter? Av Shmiyas Kol Beis Yisrael, he's Chayiv. Aim a Sefer. Then the same Rav Shimon who gave these clothes says Aim a Sefer, Kosher Bal of Yored, if it's Korban of Yored, Nasi Ki Yotzebo. And Mashiach who Bezim P'turin, the Potter entirely. Telling Mashiach who Bezim P'turin, Ma Bezim P'turin Mikal, just like Bezim's Potter from all Korban Ol Yored. It doesn't fit into the category. Bezim's only Chayiv, as we said, on Chatos Kavua, and if it's Meizir Chayiv Koris, and V'shor Chayiv Chatos Kavua. So just like Bezim's Potter in all Korban Ol Yored, Af Mashiach Potter Mikal, Mashiach is also Potter Mikal. So Rav Shimon seems to be like a stira. On the one hand, he says that a Kohen Gadol is Potter from all Tumas Mikshakachav, like we saw, really, in the name of Rabbi Yossi Aglili. And he's part of. And the other hand, he says that the Kohen Gadol is only part in Tumas Mikshakachav, but he's Chayiv Korban over the other ones. Kashan it's a seat as a stira from himself. Right, the two members are stira. Omer Avuna, Rabbi Yeshua, Lo Kasha, Kamadolas. Are we talking about when he's just poor for birds? He can afford birds, or Badali Dallas, or he's very poor? What do you mean? Rabbi Shimon Savlik, Rabbi Akiva B'chada. What did Rabbi Akiva say at the beginning of today's Gemara? Rabbi Akiva said that a Mashiach is Potter from, Kohen Gadol is Potter from all the Korban Ol Yored, right? The Nasi, he said in the Mishnah, is Chayiv and everything except for Shmiyas Kol, because he can't testify in court. But Rabbi Akiva said that a Mashiach is Potter from all of them. Why? Because since he's not allowed to bring the very poor offering, because he brings that as part of his daily minchas chavitin. So therefore he's potter on all of them. He doesn't bring them at all. So he has like this. It says the Gemara, Shimon Savla Kabakiva Chara B'chara. Savla Kabakiva B'dali Dalas. If he's very poor, then he's totally potter. Right. Well, but if he's only a little bit poor, when he could afford birds, then he doesn't agree with Rabbi Akiva's idea that if you can't afford since you can't bring the very poor offering, you don't bring the other ones either. He doesn't agree with that. He agrees with Rabbi Akiva that if you can't bring the very poor offering because that's excluded from minchas chavitin. The Kohen Gadol brings minchas chavitin every day. He's supposed to bring that asir seifa. He's not supposed to bring any other asir seifa. But if he's rich enough to afford birds or an animal, that he could bring, and that's what we mean over here in the column of Rav Shimon back in the bottom of Aleph, when he gave these clothes and he said what? These klalim. He said what? He said Shmiyas Kol, beats from Shmiyas Kacha, Bezim P'tur, Nasi Mashiach Chayavan, El Shem Nasi Chayav Shmiyas Kol, because he can't testify. Below Mashiach B'Tumas Kacha. Mashiach is not Chayav in Tumas Kacha, where he's only a little bit poor. When he's only a little bit poor, he's excluded. But if he's very poor, then he's excluded from everything. If he's very poor, then he doesn't bring anything. But if he's only a little bit, he's excluded from Tumas Mikdash. So why is he excluded from Tumas Mikdash Kachav? In other words, he could bring Bitis Vasayim and Shmias Kol. The Kohen Gadol could testify, and therefore he's chayiv on that. He's chayiv if he made a bad shvua. Why is he part of the Kachav? That we'll see. That Rav Shimon is rich, but that's where he is at least a little bit rich. He can afford birds. He can afford an animal. But if he's totally poor, then he's like he can't afford that. If he's totally poor and all he can afford is flour, he can't bring flour. Like Rabbi Kiva said that he's excluded from being a flour offering because he's mechuyev to bring minchas chavitin and no other flour offering. Right. So that's the difficult. That's the pshat in Rav Shimon. Rav Shimon is complicated, right? Rav Shimon says that a Yochanan and Nasi Mashiach are chayav, except the Kohen Gadol is potter and Tumas Mikvah Kachav in all cases, and he's potter, as we said now, from all the carbonol v'yorei if he's very poor, like Rabbi Kiva had said. Now, where does Rav Shimon get his idea from? Elish ain't Kohen Gadol chayiv. He said the Kohen Gadol is not chayiv where on Tumas Mikvah Kachav. That's what he said at the end of the Mishnah, right? That when it comes to Shmias Kol, Mitzvah Slime, and Tumas Mikvah Kachav, the three cases of carbonol v'yorei, Bezin is potter entirely because they only bring their carbon, Pamdav Shasibor, and something Zdona Kar Shigaso Kchatos Kavua. By Yachve Nasi Mashiach, Chayavin, Ella, Shein Kohen Gadol Mashiach, maybe Altumas V'Shikachav. And he also excludes that a Nasi doesn't bring Shmias Kol, like he explains in the Brisa, and like Rashi explained, he agrees with Rav Kiva in the previous Mishnah in that aspect. But he says that a Kohen Gadol doesn't bring Tumas V'Shikachav at all. Whether he's poor or whether he's a little bit poor, he doesn't bring that at all. Where do you get that from? Amar Chizkiah, my time at Rav Shimon. What's his reasoning why he says he differs when it comes to Shmias Kol and when it comes to B'tzis V'Sayim? He says there, if he can afford birds or a big animal, Kohen Gadol does bring carbonol v'yorei. Only if he's very poor, doesn't he bring it? Why? Why is that? Amar Chizkiah, my time Rav Shimon. Why is it when it comes to Tumas V'Kachav he never brings carbonol v'yorei? The Chizkiah says. Carbon, as we said, the of the three that are chayiv carbonol v'yorei, one of them, Tumas V'Kachav, if you did it on purpose, you're chayiv kares. If you lied on purpose or you denied testimony on purpose, you did a sin, right? You did a sin. You have to bring a carbonol v'yorei, but you're not chayiv kares. When it comes to V'Kachav, if you went into the base in a state of tumah on purpose, or a kachim while you're tamei on purpose, you're chayiv kares. What do you learn there? Somebody whose carbon is similar to that of the tzibur, he fits into this category. If he doesn't have the same carbon as the tzibur, right? Then, in other words, if he did it, that's since it says kares over there, since it says, even though we're not talking about where he did it on purpose, but the pasuk says if he did it on purpose, he gets kares. So we say mitocha kol that he has to have the same carbon as a kol. So if that's the case, and his carbon is not the same as the kol, why? Because the kol is a regular carbon. If you sin, you do it. Whereas the Kohen Gadol, what happens to the Kohen Gadol? He's only chayiv if he paskin wrong before, as we said. So Zim Kain Nasi Nami ain't carbon shabbal kol. He doesn't have the same carbon. Why? Because the Nasi brings what? A sawyer, and they bring other carbon. They bring a sira to kisba. So Shabbat B'Kar Yom Kippur, but on Yom they have the same kapara that the Nasi as well as the rest of the Sibur brings the same kapara on Yom Kippur. They share the same carbon. Zim Kain Kohanim Nami Lo Shavu Lakal B'Kar Yom Kippur. The Kohanim don't have the same carbon. Why do you say only the Kohen Gadol? A regular Kohen also doesn't have the same carbon as the Kahal on Yom Kippur. Why? Because the Kohanim get the kapara with the power of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. It says Kohanim Shavu Lakal B'Shar Mitzvahs L'Shana. Kohanim are similar to the people in the other mitzvahs of the year, like the sar that he brings in Kippur for all the other mitzvahs. So they're similar there. It says Mashiach Nami, Hashava B'Shar Mitzvahs L'Shana. Kohen Gadol also can share in the same mitzvahs all year and one, as we learned before. If Bezdin paskin wrong, let's say that you can eat chaylev, and the Kohen Gadol also paskin for himself that you can eat chaylev, they share in the carbon. When they find out they made a mistake, they share in the carbon. So the Kohen Gadol could also bring the same one. Elam Rava Emahachi. Misha Chatasu Shavali Yechidim, my new call. Who brings this carbon? Again, since it says by Kares, not that we're talking about Kares, we're talking about you did it b'shogeg. But the pasuk says that the whole thing only applies if the carbon that you bring is like that of the kal. The kal brings a regular carbon, a kiss per seira, whether they, whether there was no psak at all, they made a mistake. They bring a kiss per seira. Whereas the Kohen Gadol only brings it if he paskin wrong about himself. Says Rashi, Ela Ema Rava, about halfway down on the side on the right, halfway down Rashi on the right side. Elam Rav Eimachi. Mitoch Kamisha Chato Shavli Yechidim, the Machai B'Shigas Maisa, just Chai making a mistake. Yechidim, Shechatu B'Shigas Maisa, Maisi Kol Chad Echad, Yechidim, Kal, Dechi Chatu, Kal, B'Shgaga, Maisa L'Chudei, below Am Dover, if they did so Helm Dover, Maisi Kol B'Chad, Carbon, the Osa, Shavli Yechidim, B'Dover said, to Machai, to Mismish Kochav. Yatsa Mashiach, like here too. Yatsa Mashiach, Ein Chato Shavli Yachid, Yechiyata B'Shigas Maisa, below Am Dover, he's potter entirely. As we said, the Kohen Gadol is only chayiv if he paskin wrong. If the Kohen Gadol made a mistake, he went to the restaurant and he ate chaylev instead of shimon by mistake, he picked up the wrong food, he's not chayiv anything, he's potter from everything. But Ligami, Kamila come on Perak Basra. So you see, Me'amaras, he has to be like, the Kohen Gadol has to be like, therefore his carbon is different, and therefore he's potter, because by Tumas Mikshur Kodshav, when it says B'mezid, Yechayiv Kores, it says Mitocha Kol. It's only if you're like the call, and he's not like the call. So Rav Shimon has this drasha, which the others don't necessarily dash in that way. We said Rabbi Yossi says that the Nasi and the Kohen Gadol are from everything because they're rich. Rabbi Kiva said no, the Nasi is chayiv and everything except for Shmias Kol, and he said Rabbi Kiva also said that the Kohen Gadol is potter from everything. Why? Because he can't bring the flour offering, so he's potter from everything. Whereas Rabbi Shimon is saying the Kohen Gadol is potter only from Tumas Mikshkashav because he doesn't fit into the pasuk, because his carbon is not like that of the other karbanos. In general, he's not Misha Chadas Shavel Yechidim. Mind you, call his carbon in general is not like that of Yachid because he has the paskin wrong, not that of Yachid, and therefore doesn't fit into the pasuk. But Reb Shimon would say, and Reb Shimon we said also agrees that the Kohen Gadol does not bring the Kohen Gadol does not is not only is he potter from Tumas Mikshur Kodshav, right? We said Rashi, and what? And he also would agree with Rabbi Kiva that the Nasi is potter from Shmias Kol because he can't testify. But Reb Shimon does say here that the Kohen Gadol is chayiv on the other on Shmias Bitui and on Shmias Biti and on Shmias Kol, the Kohen Gadol would be chayiv a carbon olavi already. So we have three different machlokas, and then there could be a fourth machlokas that the Rabbanan say you're chayiv, that the Kohen Gadol and the Nasi are chayiv in everything. They don't hold these rushes. Rabbi Lezer Omer. Rabbi Lezer at the end of the mission like this: Hanasi may be sar. Interesting thing. The king brings a sar. Now we're talking about the carbon olavi already. Pasuk says if you made a mistake, you made a mistake, b'shogeg. You went into the basement, you stayed at Tumah. You swore that you didn't know testimony when you did. You made a false shvuah. Says you bring a carbon olavi already. What said at the end of the Mishnah, the Nasi brings a sawyer, like a case where you ate chaylev by mistake. Where do you get that from? Blazer Nasi maybe sawyer. Amar B'Yochanan, lo Amar Blazer el b'tum sekachav. He only was talking about kachav. Paul never correspond. Because since there's kares there like a regular chatos kavua, we said 31 cases where you chayav a chatos kavua. If you did it for shogeg, did it for mezer, you chayav kares. Since by tumas mikshur kachav of the three carbon olavi already, tumas mikshur is the only one you're chayav kares. If you did it for mezer, so since it's like a mezer, he says, you know what? If a nasi does it, right? Normally something is chayav mezer or b'shogeg chayav a chatos. The nasi brings a sawyer. Here too, he brings a sawyer. Amar Papa Chaim Mistabra. It's Mistabra that. When Rabbi Lezer said this, he was only talking about the Nasi being chayav a sa'ir in the case of Tumas Mikshur. The Stavra, these are Rabbi Lezer al Kulikam. If he's talking about all three cases, including Shvuas Biti and Shmias Kol, Michti sa'ir Nasi upar Mashiach makom yachid, the sa'ir of the Nasi and the par of the Kohen Gadol, but makom yachid lachatos koi. Right, a yachid brings a kispa sira, Kohen Gadol brings a par, and Nasi brings a sa'ir. So this is not Mashiach maybe par. Why does he say Mashiach also should bring a par by Shmias Kol B'Tas V'Sayim? He didn't say that. Why don't you say the Mashiach should also bring a par by Shmias Kol B'Tas V'Sayim? Even if you say that he holds like a Shimon, that the Kohen Mashiach cannot bring the Tumas Mikshur Kachav because he's excluded from the pasuk like Rav Shimon said, but why can't you say that the Kohen Gadol should bring par by Mashiach Kol B'Tas V'Sayim? El middle of Mashiach Shema Mina Tumas Mikshur Kachav. He's only going there, and by Tumas Mikshur Kachav he agrees with Reb Shimon that the Kohen Gadol doesn't bring Tumas Mikshur Kachav. Ella Shema Tumas Mikshur Kachav Koi. The Mashiach Potter, like Reb Shimon said above. Amalei Rav Huna Brei Rav Nasan Rav Papa. Listen, it's Mimai who says Mimai Dilma Rav Lezer Akun Koi. Maybe Rav Lezer when he says that the Nasi always brings a sawyer for all three cases. By Mashiach, he holds like Rabbi Akiva, who holds what? That the Kohen Gadol can't bring any korban ol v'yored at all. The Mashiach pater mikula. Maybe that's what he holds. That's why he doesn't bring a Mashiach. Amalei Rabbi Akiva mi pater le mi par. This is an interesting thing. When Rabbi Akiva said at Amalaf that he can't bring a korban ol v'yored, why? Because the pasuk says he brings the minchas chavitin and no other asiras ha'efa, only minchas chavit. And if he's excluded from minchas chavitin, he can't bring the other ones either. Maybe Rabbi Akiva holds he would still bring a par though. He's a Kohen Gadol. Maybe he would bring a par if he passing wrong. He would bring a par. Rabbi Akiva mi pater mi par. But soon maybe he can't answer anymore. In other words, even if he holds like Rabbi Akiva, maybe he should bring a par. Why do you say he's pater from everything? Interesting thing. That's a far out thing to say that. Says Rashi on the left side. Amar le Rabbi Akiva mi pater, about a third of the way down on the page or a quarter of the way down. V'em Mashiach mi par. Dilma ki Amar Rabbi Akiva Mashiach pater mikula mitumas mishkachav shvis kol beis Yisrael go and lavi korban ol v'yorei avlavi par machayev Akiva the machayev par imkein nisni namir belazer Mashiach maybe par b'shmis kol beis Yisrael el muktaniach shma mira tumsik is going on there koivra blazer the nasi maybe sire boven and bakaris kikfua Roliktan Mashiach maybe par the tumsik mishkachav mishum sayos like Shimon Damar ain't a coin gadol. As we said above, because he doesn't fit into the pasuk of Hakahal. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Moda Rabbi Lezer she'ein maybe Asham. Rabbi Lezer's Moda that he doesn't bring Asham. What Asham? Asham Toli, right? Remember, Asham Toli is only where when do you bring an Asham Toli? If you're not sure if you did a sin for which the punishment would be a chatos kavua, not a korban ol v'yorei. So he says like this. Rabbi Yochanan says, even though Rabbi Lezer said that the king brings a sa'ir on a sin which the Torah specifies korban ol v'yorei, right? Korban ol v'yorei. That's what he says here, korban ol v'yorei. The king doesn't bring the korban ol v'yorei because he's not poor, let's say, like Rabbi Yosef Lili said, and he can't testify. So a king would be pater there. But he says, the way Rabbi Yochanan explained Rabbi Lezer, a king does bring a sa'ir, for Tumas Mikdash Mekachef. If he made a mistake and Tumas Mikdash went to the base Mikdash state of Tumah, he brings a sa'ir. He doesn't bring a Rasham Toli, he doesn't bring a korban ol v'yorei, he brings a sa'ir. Now, if he brings a sa'ir, which is a chatos kavua, so maybe he should be chayav Rasham Toli too if he's not sure. We're saying now that according to Blazer, if the coin went into the base of Mikdash, the king rather, if the king went into the base of Mikdash state of Tumah by mistake, right? Everybody else, a normal commoner, brings a korban ol v'yorei, right? Korban ol v'yorei, rich, middle, poor, right? Kohen Gadol brings a korban ol v'yorei. A Kohen Gadol doesn't bring anything, doesn't fit in for nichrasa, doesn't bring anything. Okay, the king, Rabbi Lezer said, brings a sa'ir like we bring for a regular sin. Why? Because since it says v'nichrasa, right? Rabbi Yochanan said, Ramaz was his reasoning. Why? Since it says karis like a kavua, so it's like a kavua, even though it's not kavua. The Torah specifies korban ol v'yorei, but the king brings a sa'ir. He can't bring the korban ol v'yorei, let's say, because he's not poor, right? But he brings a sa'ir. So if he brings a sa'ir, maybe if he's not sure if he sinned, he should bring an asham tali. When do you bring an asham tali? If you're not sure if you sinned about a chatos kavua, since he says you bring a chatos kavua over here, the king, maybe he should bring an asham tali if he's not sure. So he says no. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Motor Blazer she'ein maybe asham tali. He does bring. Tani Kamar Sheshes. That in other words, he only goes so far. He says the king, okay, he can't bring korban ol v'yorei, so he brings a sa'ir. But you're not going to say that he's really a chayiv, normally a chatos kavua, in the sense that if he's not sure if he did the sin, he's possibly did the sin, he brings Asham Toli. Asham Toli is only when you're not sure if he did a chatos kavua. This is sort of like a chatos kavua, but it's not. Tana learned in front of Rav Sheshes, Asham Toli, Baal, Tumas V'Shikotcha. Asham Toli does bring for that. How would he bring Tumas V'Shikotcha? Even though Asham Toli is not bring, Tumas V'Shikotcha is only Olav Yord, it's not chas kavua. Amalei Damel Chamani, who said that Rabbi Lezer, you think it goes like a Lezer, Damer Hov, and Rabbi Karis. He thinks it goes like Rabbi Lezer, who said, since it says Karis, Kekvua, Maisi, Nasi, Sawyer, Alea, you think it's going like that? I from Rabbi Yochanan and Motor Rabbi Lezer, Shane maybe Asham Tali. He says it's not that case. In other words, how could you say that you bring an Asham Tali on a case of Tumas V'Shikot? Tumas V'Shikot is korban ol v'yorei. You don't bring an Asham Tali on Tumas V'Shikot, only on something else like Kavua. Oh, maybe you want to say it goes like Rabbi Lezer, who says that he says you bring a Chatos Kavua, you bring a Sa'ir, even on Tumas V'Shikot of a coin. But Rabbi Yochanan already explained that even though Rabbi Lezer says you bring a Chatos Kavua on that case of korban ol v'yorei, So one exception to it's like an exception to the rule that the Nasi does that, but he still wouldn't agree that you bring an Asham Tali if the Nasi wasn't sure if he did it. He's not sure from Kasha. Staka Kasha. You can't say who said that then? Who said this Tana who learned in front of Tana Kama in front of Rav Sheshes, who said that you bring an Asham Tali into some Kasha? Who could it be like? Like Rabbi Lezer, who says that the Nasi brings a Sawyer for Tumas Mikshah Kachav when he made a mistake and he knows he went into the base of by mistake, he brings a Sawyer. And therefore, you want to say that if he did it, if he wasn't sure, he would bring an Asham Tali. Rabbi Echman said, Rabbi Lezer's motive, you don't bring an Asham Tali there. So it's a kasha. Your memory goes like nobody. And now we begin the third and final parak of Horios.
It's probably because, I mean, this is probably still a kasha.
Not
answering the kasha. A regular person brings a siyura, right? Kispa, right?
Not for Tumas Mishkacha.
No.
Oh no! He would bring it. It's a problem of the all rate. If he's rich, he would bring a Kizbar Sira. Correct. If he's rich, he would bring a Kizbar Sira. A regular person.
A regular chatas is a Kispa Sira.
A regular chatas of a chatas kavua, or are you talking about a carbon of the all rate?
Either one, right? It's
Okay. Right.
Right. The nasi is designated as a sire.
Correct.
As a male.
Right.
That's probably where it came from. That the nasi
of course
doesn't answer the kasha. And just
what do you mean? Is it where what came from? This idea here? Of course, it came from there. Right. So he brings a nasi. Right. So yeah.
So I'm saying that's probably where
Rabbi Lezer got it
the
from.
mistake came from. Right? That he's saying that nasi goes with the seir no matter what.
Right.
Even if it's a carbon over, it's a seir.
Right.
It's designated seir.
Yeah.
It doesn't answer the question. I'm saying where would he have got this idea?
Yeah. Of course he got it from there.
Because it's a seir and not a seir.
So you're right. Of course he got it. He brings the seir. Of course. How do Mashiach? Says the Mishnah. Kohen Mashiach shechata, Kohen Gadol who sinned, and let's say he sinned, he paskin wrong for himself. What did he have to bring for a regular sin? A par Kohen Mashiach, right? So then he left the priesthood. Yeah,
what?
He left the priesthood. He left. He quit, or he resigned, or he was forced out. Whatever it was, he's out. He's out now. What carbon does he bring? When he sinned, he was a Kohen Gadol. Now he's a commoner. What does he bring now? Okay. The king sinned. What does he bring, Michael? A sawyer, right? So Kohen Mashiach may be par, but Nasi may be sawyer. Listen to this. The Tanna Kama says like this. It goes on when you sinned. When he sinned, he was a Kohen Gadol. He was in office then, right? You want to compare this to the way they pardon everybody before they leave office. No, let's not go there. I didn't need that. That slipped out. Okay, so he sinned when he was in office. Now he's not in office anymore. Tanna says you look at when he sinned. When he sinned, he was a Kohen Gadol. When he sinned, he was a king. Fine. Okay. Mashiach Shavim Mashiach. Let's say though he left office and then he sinned. Not the same. Kohen Mashiach may be par. The Kohen Gadol is always the king. He still brings a par. Vanasi kehedyo. The Nasi brings that. In other words, a king when he quits, he's a commoner totally. So if he left the throne, he's no longer the king. Let's say Shlomo Melech, who wasn't king afterwards, whatever. He left the throne and he's like, yeah, he goes. In other words, the Tanna Kama says depends on when he sinned, except for the Kohen Gadol, because it says if they left their jobs and then they sin, also Chata, Kohen Mashiach still brings a par. So it means that the Kohen Gadol brings the car of the Kohen Gadol, whether he sinned in office or whether he sinned after office. Okay, sinned in office. But for the king, it depends on was he in office or not. Now, the Gemara says, I understand. Why do you have to tell me that case of the Kohen Gadol? If even after he left office, he brings the sin offering of when he was in office, certainly when he's in office, right? When he's no longer the Kohen Gadol. Maybe par, he brings the par. If he sinned while he was in office and then he left office, so the answer is Mishum Diktani. The way Rashi learns that Rashi has two different shots over here. There's Mishum Diktani Gabi Nasi. Take a look at Rashi before you look at Amar Aleph. Rashi right at the beginning of the Mishnah. Maybe Parachad, he's reading Berkach of Meshichusa, me boy. It says Nasi, it's a Chadish Nasi. I might think, since when the Nasi quits, listen, since when the Nasi quits and then he sinned, he's a commoner. So maybe if he sinned while he was in office and now he quit, he's also a commoner. Right? So Kamash one that we don't say that. In other words, the Chiddush is, you're right, there's no Chiddush in the Kohen Gadol, the Chiddush is in the Nasi, right? Back in the Gemara now, in the second line on Yerav, so Kedio Maisi brings like Nasi, even though that's obvious. Maybe part. But no, I mean, where do we get this from? Where do we get this idea from? The Tanur Rabbanim. The hikr of al chataso, he brings on his sin, meaning like he's there all the time, so to speak. Malamid shemevi chataso misha. Tell me that the Kohen Gadol brings his chatas even after he quit. Even after he quit, he's still going chataso. You know, he's still considered. It's like you say that there are certain people, you know, even after they left office, they still call them judge or governor or president or whatever, even after they left office. Well, the Kohen Gadol, even after he left office, he's still called the high priest, you know? Yeah, he's a Kohen, but he's called the high priest. He's called the Kohen Gadol. I think below dinu. Uman Nasi, listen to this couple. Man Nasi, Shemei Vishigas Maisa. Manachanav a Nasi, the king, who just brings his carbon, his sa'ir, even just by making a mistake. But he doesn't bring his chatas after he left office. If he sinned after leaving office, Mashiach Shein maybe Bishgaga. He doesn't bring stam shgaga. He has to paskin wrong first. He doesn't bring Mishigas Maisa. Ela Helm Dover. So he's got a paskin wrong in Mishigas Maisa. So lo koshkein. So he should certainly be off the hook if he sinned afterwards, because more is involved. Even he brings his chatos even after he left office. If he sinned, he still brings it. So Venesi Nami Nasi, so Anshling Nasi also Mikal B'chomer, or Mama Mashiach Sheni, maybe Mishigas Maisa. A Nasi doesn't make Maisa. Maybe chatos Misha Avar. Yeah, Nasi Shemei Mishigas Maisa. All he's got to do is make a mistake. Mishigas Maisa, and it didn't Shemei Chatas Misha. He should bring his chatos if he sinned after leaving office. Talmud Lomar Asher Nasi Yechta. The pasuk that Michael quoted. Asher Nasi Yechta. Shu Nasi Ain Shu Hadyot Lo. It says Asher Nasi only if he sinned while he's in office, then he brings it. But if he sinned after office, he doesn't bring it. That's the first opinion here. On tomorrow's Mishnah, we're going to see that not everybody agrees. It depends not only when he sinned, he also has to know about it. He also has to know about it. He had to sin and know about it at the same time. In other words, if he sinned and left office, but he didn't find out about it until after he left office, Reb Shimon would disagree and say no, that he's potter from the power, and he brings like an individual. All right, we'll see you tomorrow. Mitzvah Hashem. Have a good day, everybody.
Kohen Gadol, after he's no longer in office,
Yeah.
he married an almana.
An almana, Kohen Gadol. It's a good question. You know what? I'm going to.
Some reason they have that Kohen Gadol after most of them.
Yeah, that he still has halacha like a Kohen Gadol, right? Yeah.
If he made.
Yeah, I think he remains a Kohen Gadol. Yeah, that fits in good with this.
Yeah.
I agree.
Secret Service is still giving him. If the president leaves office, he still gets Secret Service.